My name is Pam Hall, and this is Earth News. Today's guest is Jim Chrisman, and he is the leader of the Midland chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. And his subject today is a laser focus on a solution. Jim, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my wife and I have lived in Midland for 30 years, and we've raised 3 kids here. I think probably my biggest accomplishment since I've been here is building the mountain bike trails in the Midland City Forest. I'm also a writer. Poetry and short stories and one novel. But today we're going to talk about Citizens Climate Lobby, which, until we get some real movement on climate, I'm not going to count as an accomplishment. It's something I've been working on for 8 years. But
how did you get involved with Citizens Climate Lobby?
About 8 years ago, Lynn Pettengill came to Midland, gave a talk at the Chippewa Nature Center about Citizens Climate Lobby. With her intent was to start a chapter here, and I had to leave early, and I just remember saying, I'll do whatever I can for you. And shortly after that, I found out I was the leader of the Midland chapter.
Awesome. That's really awesome.
But I was just sick to death of arguing with people about the science of climate change, which has seemed for a long time to be abundantly clear.
Right.
And what wasn't clear was what we needed to do about it. And Citizens Climate Lobby, as the title of our little session today indicates, is we're laser focused on a solution.
And my experience has only been a couple years. So if you see the acronym CCL, that does stand for Citizens Climate Lobby, and they also, if you hear the words carbon fee and dividend, that is also associated with this group. So Jim, I know that you lead the Midland chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, and what is it that they do exactly?
So for more than a decade, but well before I joined, they've been focused on this solution. The concept is called carbon fee and dividend, where you put a price on carbon upstream, the mine, the wellhead, the port, wherever it first comes into commerce. Right? You put a price on it there, and you take that money, and it makes a quick trip through the U.S. Treasury, where they basically divide by the number of people in the country, and everybody gets a check. And that price on carbon rises, right, incrementally. It starts fairly low at $15 per ton of potential CO2 emissions. In other words, if you burn this barrel of oil, this pile of coal, it's going to produce this much carbon dioxide. And so it's per ton of potential CO2 emissions, and it starts at $15 per ton and goes up at $10 per ton per year. So everybody can see the shape of things to come. And energy companies can adapt. They can see that, very quickly the price of carbon-based fuels exceeds the price of wind, of gas. Of gas and coal, and that wind becomes the most, and solar. And we don't really care what the solution is, right? These are market-based decisions. This is a market-based solution. But we know that the cost to society of burning all those fossil fuels has not been paid for. That's what economists call an externality. So putting a price on carbon is a market correction.
So it's measurable, and it's utilizing math and science, so logical.
Yeah.
And so why do you think carbon fee and dividend is the best solution?
Well, because it's market based is one reason. In order for legislation to be durable, as we've seen with the Affordable Care Act, it needs to have bipartisan support from the beginning. If it doesn't, and we get a change of administrations, it's going to go backwards. Now, not every politician is as vindictive as the current occupant, but how hard he's been working to reverse everything that President Obama's name is associated with. And another administration could do the same thing if it was not bipartisan legislation. So being market-based, it gives it's going to be effective, and it gives Republicans a choice. I mean, we've got libertarian think tanks that are quite far to the right in terms of their thinking on markets, that have endorsed it. I mean, once you admit we have a problem, like an alcoholic, you have to start by admitting you have a problem. Then you've got to go to your range of solutions, and this solution is one that I think everyone could agree on is the best and least disruptive. And if you give all the money back from this solution, from the upstream fee that you put on carbon, if you give all that back to people on an equal basis, first of all, it protects the bottom 60% of income earners. They actually get back more than the increase in fossil fuel prices are going to cost them. So it protects them. The next 20%, where many of us are in Midland, it's kind of a wash. And for the top earners, we can put solar panels on the roof and buy a Tesla. We don't have to pay it either. So it's a win-win-win all the way across.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder why anyone would have a problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, if conservatives don't get on board with a process like this, with a program like this, based on economic principles and being a market-based solution, if they don't get on board with that, we're going to get a regulatory solution that they'll like a lot less. So by not joining in this effort, they're pushing the whole movement to the left.
That's true, and it's infringing on their freedom. And this way they have more control. So because it's market based. Yeah. And they have their freedom. It's like you said, it's a win-win situation. So I understand the core principles of carbon fee and dividend, like the effectiveness of reducing CO2 emissions, returning 100% of net revenues to Americans, revenue neutrality, a market-based, nonpartisan approach, and protecting the most vulnerable have been incorporated into legislation introduced into the U.S. House of Representatives last November. How many co-sponsors does it have, and how many of them are Republican?
So there's only there's 60 co-sponsors.
Okay.
There's only one Republican. But as I like to say, would you care to guess which state they're from? And when people can't guess, I give them a little hint. I said, well, you think better when your feet are wet. And usually fairly soon after that, they guess Florida. Because they're going to be the first ones impacted by rising sea levels. Right. And they've already got sunny day flooding in North Miami. That's in the Green New Deal, too. They explain that quite clearly. So how is this market-based? Liberals came up with this, right? Well, actually, liberals didn't come up with this by themselves, or certainly not political liberals. I don't know where James Hansen stands on the political spectrum. He's a climate scientist. He was one of the architects of the deal.
Well, that's good for people to understand that this was actually founded by
he's a leading climate scientist.
Who is a scientist, and not politically driven.
But in terms of the economic program, of the guts of the program of this policy, George Shultz played a big part. Right. And you may remember George Shultz was Secretary of State under Ronald Reagan. Right. And he also served as Secretary of the Treasury. And he was chairman of, I think it's the business school or Department of Economics.
Right, I looked him up and I saw Republican Party. So
he's a Republican and University of Chicago academic. Right. And Secretary of State to Ronald Reagan. So could you have any more bona fides than that? He's currently in his 90s and he's still a sharp guy.
Cool.
Yeah. he's very much behind it. And there is a conservative plan to solve climate change that is a little bit different in some of its details, but it hasn't been translated into a bill yet. And what we've talked about with carbon fee and dividend is actually, now a bill.
Right, and it's a little surprising there aren't more Republicans on board with this, seeing as that's the inception.
Yeah.
And plus, speaking of subgroups, I saw that there was a Christian movement part of CCL.
Yeah, there is. I hadn't thought about that very much, but right. I mean, when we're talking to religious people about climate change, many of them are on the conservative side of the spectrum, but when you use words like covenant and what is the word I'm trying to think of?
I think I know what you're talking about.
Starts with S, yeah.
Right, where they're good stewards.
Yeah, stewardship. Yeah,
right.
Stewardship. I mean, when we use those kinds of words because that's what we need to do. On some religion allows for lots of different ways to interpret things, and I think when we were at the county fair last week, I saw some of that. I mean, people would be quoting Revelation to me, and
right next to.
Yeah, and
but he was actually on board.
Yeah,
supportive.
but the Book of Revelation, they're saying, well, we're supposed to burn soon anyway. This is God's plan.
Well, don't help make it happen.
No, no.
God gave us a brain, right?
Yeah, and He gave us scientists. And He gave us wind and sun, and so there's a number of ways to look at this.
So the seminars have.
I assume if their house was on fire, they'd call the fire department.
Right.
And
the CCL seminars is where I first became aware that there were whole church groups. So if you go to the website, you can see those in more detail. So why not just let people respond freely by recycling and maybe driving a Prius and planting some trees?
Well, remember Dick Cheney?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dick Cheney was an oil man, right? Halliburton and all that. And he once very sagely said that personal virtue is not a substitute for an energy policy. And while I don't agree with Mr. Cheney on very many things, he got that exactly right. His idea of an energy policy is probably drill, baby, drill. But nonetheless, there isn't much you can do. You can't be effective enough on a personal basis. This needs national and international action by everyone. And no matter how well-intentioned you are, when you're in your house and you flip the lights on, you've got no control as where that electricity comes from. And so we need to accelerate the change to these renewable forms of energy so that everyone gets wind and solar energy when they get a cold beer
and give
from
the power back to the people.
Right.
And the choice.
Right. And when you flip on the lights, really all you care is the lights come on. When you come in the studio here, all of this electronic equipment, it's all running on electricity. And in our case, it's 10% wind and solar, and something in that.
It could be better.
Yeah, something in that range, and 90%, I think, gas. I don't know if we've got any coal energy in the mix here from consumers, but and certainly gas is better than coal, but it's not where we need to be.
Right.
We've gone since the start of the industrial age. We were at 280 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. We're now up to 415. So I haven't calculated that lately. It must begin to be 48% increase.
And we're the city of modern explorers, so we could do better. And there have been attempts, as you know.
Yeah, many cities around the country have made that commitment.
It's very discouraging when the businesses don't do well. I don't believe it's because there isn't the desire to have them here. It's the competition is.
Well, in terms of competition and doing well, I mean, if you want to stabilize costs for your business,
Right.
Nobody's going to raise the price on wind.
Mhm.
Nobody's going to raise the price on.
Oh,
on
I didn't
the
mean
sun.
competition in that way. I meant
Well,
their competitors
I
were being kind
do
of
mean it that way. I
undermining
mean,
the
we
business.
can be more competitive.
Right.
When Dow built its big plant down
Right.
on the Gulf a few years ago, part of the deal was that they would get this big wind energy installation down
Mhm.
there to provide them a steady source
Mhm.
of energy that they knew was going to be stable in price.
Mhm.
It's a good business decision. They didn't do it to be Boy Scouts.
Right.
They did it because it's a
Right.
it's a hard-nosed
Right.
business decision.
Right. But
Yeah.
that's how we're going to win with this, is by having good hard-nosed business decisions
Yeah.
that beat them at their price point.
Right. Right.
So anyway, and it is a win-win. It's really not trying to undermine someone's business. They have the money and the power to make the change. They just need to do it. So what is the point of introducing the Energy Innovations and Carbon Dividend Act in the House if the Republican-controlled Senate will never pass it and President Trump calls global warming a hoax?
Yeah. Well, if this was going to be the political landscape forever, it would be pointless.
Mhm.
But it won't be forever.
Yeah.
And just as it took us 10 years to go from the concept of carbon fee and dividend to a bill introduced in the House called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act that incorporates those principles, just as that took 10 years, it takes time to build political will. And that's
Mhm.
what Citizens Climate Lobby is all about, building political will for a livable world. And that political will, we will continue to build it as changes come to the administration and to the power in the Senate, and eventually we will be able to pass these things. I mean, it's impossible, inevitable.
Right.
It's going to happen.
Change is inevitable. And
Change
some
is
people-
inevitable, and this is a change we have to make.
Right. Some people resist change, but
Yeah.
some people are wondering what is taking so long with the
Right.
change
Right.
in the bureaucracy. So, okay, so Citizens Climate Lobby appears to be a grassroots organization.
Yeah.
Does CCL have additional ways to influence decision makers?
Sure, we're working right up and down the line, and we've got, as well as grassroots, we work grass tops. So we look for business leaders to endorse the concept. We meet with them directly, as well as the word lobby and Citizens Climate Lobby is really an active word. We're in there talking to legislatures regularly. That's how we've got 60 sponsors on this.
There was a lot of success in the Grand Rapids area. I remember, again, seeing that at different seminars for CCL.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that has been a conservative
Sure.
area in Michigan. So
Sure.
why is that having more success in other conservative areas, do you think?
Well, I can't really answer that, but I know there's a big data company, and I don't remember the name of it, that moved into the old steel house or steel case headquarters there in Grand Rapids. That beautiful pyramid-shaped building that's in Kentwood, not too far from where I grew up, and it's a data storage, computer data storage company, and in order to relocate there, it's a very energy-intensive business. These big server farms,
Right.
And in order to relocate there, they insisted on some high percentage of the energy that was going to power that had to come from wind or solar,
Right.
and that was a precondition for that business moving there. So that's how Grand Rapids got that great big business with all those great jobs,
Yeah.
was by and it's the same thing that Dow did on the Gulf. They said, we will build this plant, but we got to have wind energy.
Right.
So businesses understand which way the wind blows.
Right, exactly. I remember them saying that. I just wanted
Yeah,
you to
yeah,
tell that.
yeah.
So global warming is obviously global, and the U.S. isn't even the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases. So what do we do about the rest of the world?
Yeah, that's a question that comes up regularly, and it should. It's an important question. So incorporated into the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is the ability to do border adjustments, right? border adjustments. I'm not sure exactly how they're different from tariffs, but they are entirely compliance with WTO regulations and all that sort of thing. And basically, goods coming in from countries, carbon and energy intensive goods coming from countries that don't have a price on carbon, where they're using lots of fossil fuels and they're not making an effort to make the switch. We put an adjustment on based on the essentially implied carbon content of that material. You've got a ton of steel. Well, how much energy, how much carbon-based energy did it take to make that?
Right.
And if it's coming in, then you're gonna pay that. Aluminum, glass, whatever it is, those things coming in that are energy intensive, there'll be a border adjustment on that. So that has several effects. It keeps American companies from offshoring.
Right.
But it also very much helps to export the program. People in that country X, whatever it is, that are sending those goods to the U.S. See that border adjustment money coming into the U.S. Treasury and being distributed to you and me, the same as the same.
They'll figure it out.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Why are we making Americans richer when we can make ourselves richer?
Okay.
Right.
That's smart.
Yeah, it only makes sense, and that's how you export the program.
Right.
Now, having said that, I'm not sure how necessary this is really going to be. Canada has already instituted carbon fee and dividend, and they did it based on their incubator, which was British Columbia. So British Columbia has had a price on carbon with a rebate back to people as a tax refund for more than 20 years, and they keep re-electing these governments because they like the policy.
Right.
And they've got the fastest growing economy in Canada and the lowest fossil fuel use. The strength of economy isn't linked to fossil fuel use. It's linked to energy.
Right.
You need energy, but it doesn't have to come from fossil fuel.
Right.
And so we can make that transition. The state in the U.S. that has the most wind power has some of the lowest energy costs, if not the lowest. I'm not sure of the figures on that. In terms of per kilowatt hour of electricity at your home. Do you know what state that is? It's Iowa.
Oh,
right.
okay.
Iowa has got in their mix they've got the most. And another conservative state that actually produces the most wind energy of any state, not as percentage of mix, but the most wind energy. You know what state that would be? That produces the most wind energy? Texas. Right. Okay. So. They're not doing it because they're good Boy Scouts. They're doing it because it's good business.
Right.
Anyway,
well, it's just like transportation. Like, people are married to the idea that cars with gasoline is the only way humans ever got around or ever will get around.
Right.
Certainly, there are ways in the future that will be more sustainable, and they're already implemented in other countries.
Yeah.
Are there any other countries besides Canada that you can think of off the top, and does CCL have a list of those countries?
No, there aren't others that have adopted a carbon fee and dividend type policy as far as I know, but CCL has chapters in 40 countries. We've got more than 100,000 members in this country, and we've got members in every or almost every, I think it's every congressional district. I don't think we have a chapter in every district, but we've got members in every congressional district in the U.S. I
know we've gone to Washington several times.
Yeah, I've been to Washington several times, and that's what we do.
All right, so I saw you working the CCL booth in Midland County Fair last week. I was there with you.
Yeah.
How did people react to your message?
Well, people had a lot of reactions. It's a rural cut of an almost rural community. So when you're at the fair, you're kind of in Trump country.
Yeah.
And so as far as snagging people walking down the aisles to talk, I think we were getting about 1 in 10, something like that. They skewed very much toward the younger. and they skewed toward young parents, people with kids.
Right, I noticed that too.
Yeah.
And I noticed that some of the families were disapproving that they were interested in talking more about it. And
Yeah,
it's
no,
kind of
some
sad.
didn't. Some definitely didn't. Especially on rodeo night, I
Yeah.
noticed we went down to about 1 in 20 that I could actually snag.
dear.
You know, I'd
I
say,
wasn't there that
"You interested in doing something about climate change?"
Right.
And, not today.
Well, I saw the horses, but I wasn't helping with the booth.
Yeah, and had a few very buttoned-up types,
Right.
you know, that walked by that would break out in laughter.
Yeah.
Derisive laughter.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and
Oh boy.
but boy, if people with kids and young people that you know that understand the science and know what we're facing,
Right.
boy. You want to do something about? Yeah, I want to do something about climate change. Yeah, what do you got? You know, and
If they could just understand it's their kids' future and really get that part of it.
Yeah.
And like I had said in the last Earth News, use their 5 senses, look around.
Yeah.
You can experience climate change. It's happening. And look at all the disasters that we've had environmentally and with the weather and all the species that go extinct, 150 every day.
Yeah.
That can't be stated enough. We're at a crisis.
Right. I don't know if you read the book The Sixth Extinction, but I mean we're
That was a
on
good
the
one.
verge of extincting up to 1 million species apparently.
Right.
And it's a disaster of just unbelievable proportions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people say, "Oh, the climate's always changing." Well, if you look at the climate, the way it actually changes, it's a 100,000-year cycle based on Milankovitch cycles of the tilt and orbit of the Earth around the sun and so forth. And you know, Milankovitch, by the way, was a Serbian prisoner of war, a mathematician, back around the First World War, and he had plenty of time sitting in his cell to figure this out. But you know, he figured out that this is what correlates with the cyclic changes. I mean, there's non-cyclic changes like being hit by an asteroid or the you know, Yellowstone blowing up. But those cyclic changes are very slow. And you know, the last ice age, we didn't have a built environment on the coast. You know, if you you know, you live in a bark hut or a teepee, you just move inland, you know, or whatever. You know, you can adjust. But we've got trillions of dollars of real estate just in a few big cities. I mean,
how many lives? Yeah.
The middle of
in the
Manhattan is
coastal
33 feet above sea level. Not to mention Miami and all the other coastal cities, New Orleans, which are even lower than that. So, you know, the costs that we're going to face, you know, all of this infrastructure that really can't be moved, all the military Navy bases, you know, people say, why does Navy have to worry? They're in boats.
Makes you wonder
well,
why.
they have ports, and those ports are going to be going underwater, like in Norfolk.
Makes you wonder if that's maybe why Trump wanted to buy Greenland.
Yeah, jeez. Yeah, who knows what he's thinking.
Exactly. Jim, what are the effects of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act?
Yeah, the economic effects. Well, we talked earlier about, you know, 60% of people actually coming out ahead on this. And what happens when you put more money in people's pockets? Right? They spend it. Right. And so you get a stimulatory effect on the economy. And the estimates are that in 10 years, it would create 2.1 million jobs that wouldn't have existed otherwise. So over and above whatever the job levels would have been, more than 2 million jobs on top of that. Increases in GDP as well. So the energy, you know, people like to worry about the cost of this. Well, it's revenue neutral and it creates jobs. Yeah, I mean, we've just ballooned the deficit by trying to stimulate the economy with tax cuts. But this would put money in people's pockets and stimulate the economy at the same time and be revenue neutral. So the economic effects, I think, would be tremendous.
Sometimes you have to think outside the box.
Yeah, you have to think outside the box to get ahead. So it's like I say, it's a win. It's a win-win-win. Yeah.
Okay. We're good. Okay. Well,
All right.
I'm going to thank you for coming on Earth News, and you're welcome back anytime.
It's been a pleasure.
I know that you have lots more where that came from, and you're one of Midland's finest as far as I'm concerned, and many feel that way, Jim. So thank you for all
Thanks.
your devotion to the subject, because it really does matter.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's very kind. Thank you.
So that's it for today's edition of Earth News. Thank you for watching, and join us again for our next guest. Thank you.